Busho again, and today I'm going to show you how to repair a noisy lock actuator. This is by no means a professional repair. It may last you the life of the vehicle, or it may not. I would definitely consider this repair over replacing the existing actuator with a $30 aftermarket replacement. The build quality and durability just isn't the same as the OEM part.
These actuators are pretty easy to fix. There are 4 screws on the back. Remove them. There's a gasket, make sure that stays in its groove. And the reason this has failed is readily apparent if you know what to look for. You can see there's a piece of rubber that fell in there. And that piece of rubber is supposed to be on this piece of metal right here. When the actuator operates, this piece of plastic swings all the way to the left and all the way to the right. And there are 2 pieces of rubber. One piece is mounted here, one piece, which is missing, is mounted here. When this piece of plastic reaches the end of its travel, it bottoms out on this piece of rubber. So the motor turns, this piece reaches the end of its travel, the gears remain in mesh, and the motor stalls out. In other words, it wants to turn, but it can't turn because these gears are meshed, and this piece of plastic has bottomed out against this piece of rubber. What happens when this piece moves in the opposite direction is, since there's no piece of rubber down here, it travels too far. And when that happens, these teeth here, the teeth on this round gear here and the teeth on this gear here, come out of mesh. The motor continues to turn, in other words, it doesn't stall out, and the teeth grind away at each other, making that noise. I've hooked up the actuator to a bench power supply, just to show you in an operation. When the actuator turns in one direction, where the rubber piece still is, there'll be no noise. You can see it operates silently, and at the end of the travel, the motor stalls out. Now in the opposite direction, this gear is going to travel too far, these 2 gears will come out of mesh, and the motor will continue to turn, making that noise that you hear. And that's why I said most of the time you can repair these actuators, because if you let this go on for too long, the teeth are just going to wear away from that constant friction. Now there are multiple ways to fix this, but the easiest way is to glue this piece of rubber back on. I like to use the gel type super glue instead of the liquid type super glue, because the liquid, in my experience, just tends to run all over the place where you don't want it. If the piece of rubber is too far gone, you could use some RTV, just put a glob on the inside, and that'll work. You could also use some faucet washers, get some flat faucet washers, cut them to size, and glue them on the inside. Whatever you use, you want it to cushion this piece of plastic when it comes to rest here. You don't want to use anything made of metal. You want to use something made of rubber. Now the easiest way to replace that piece of rubber would be to remove this whole assembly from the plastic case here, but in order to do that, you'd have to remove this pin here and pull this plastic piece off, and that's really a pain, so I'm going to show you a faster way. You want to remove these 2 screws here. You'll see when I pull back on the assembly, I can get it up just far enough to get that piece of rubber back on there. You'll see there's 2 halves to this rubber piece. One side is thicker, one side is thinner. You want the thinner side on the outside and the thicker side on the inside. To prevent it from falling off again, I'm going to put a little bit of gel type super glue on the outside area of the metal here and on the inside area. Putting a little dab of the glue. You don't need that much. And since it's gel, it won't run down inside the actuator and go where I don't want it. There it is. Fortunately, I ended up tearing one half of it off. And there it goes. Got it in there. Tweezers would have been helpful right about now, but I decided not to use them. Now while the glue's drying, you can reinstall the 2 screws. Here's the finished product. You can see where I glued the piece that fell off right up there. I've also glued the other half of it to the piece of metal. Now when this piece of plastic reaches the end of its travel, it hits this piece of rubber as it should. So now I'm going to bench test this to show you that it is repaired when the actuator goes in one direction. No noise. And when it goes in the other direction, this is the direction where it used to make noise. No noise. Reinstall the back cover, making sure the gasket here is in its groove. And reinstall the 4 screws. Now I'll test the actuator one final time. And we're good.
Here's a shorter version of this repair on a driver's side actuator. The main difference is this actuator has more wires due to a switch inside the others don't have, but the repair is identical.
Now I'm just going to show you that it does make the noise. In one direction, it's silent. In the other direction, it makes noise. Make sure the gasket stays in its groove when you remove the cover. And the culprit already fell out. It's this piece of rubber here. Most of the time you'll find it inside the actuator itself. Just a little dot, that's all you need. Then you want to reinsert the piece of rubber onto this piece of metal right here. Again, making sure that the thicker side is facing in. The thinner side should be facing out. And this could be a bit challenging. But I've done it a few times, so it's easier for me. There it is. Here's the finished product. The piece of rubber was basically in a C shape, and then you had that half that was split open. So I opened up that split, slid the piece of rubber on this way, and as you saw earlier, I put adhesive on this side of the metal and this side, that adhered it to that. Then I put a little bit more super glue over here, and then held this piece, this flap, down with a screwdriver until that dried. And that piece isn't going anywhere. The glue's had time to dry. Now you'll see when this piece of plastic goes all the way to the right, it bottoms out against this rubber piece here. And when it moves all the way to the left, it bottoms out against this rubber piece here. I'm going to bench test the actuator to show you that it's fixed. When it goes in one direction, it doesn't make any noise. And when it goes in the other direction, it also doesn't make any noise. And I'll bench test it one more time to show you that it works. No noise in that direction. And no noise in that direction.